It really is my great pleasure to be able to introduce to you this morning's speaker, James Autry. Jim Autry now lives in Des Moines, Iowa, but he grew up in the hills and hollows of Benton County, Mississippi. Like Andy, he is the son and grandson of Mississippi Baptist ministers. After graduating from the University of Mississippi, Jim served as a jet fighter pilot in the Air Force. He entered the newspaper business and from there moved to Better Homes and Gardens magazine. He eventually became senior vice president at the Meredith Corporation and president of its magazine group, a $500 million operation with 900 employees. In 1991, Jim Autry took early retirement to pursue his present career as a poet and consultant. Jim received considerable national attention when he was one of the poets featured on Bill Moyer's PBS series, The Power of the Word. He has received numerous awards for his poetry and his journalism, and also 3 honorary Doctor of Letters degrees. Jim has been instrumental in shaping the field of service journalism and has worked to establish service journalism chairs at the University of Missouri and also at the University of Mississippi. He has been active in many civic and charitable organizations, most notably working with disability rights groups for the last 25 years. Jim's 4 books include 2 books of poetry, Nights Under a Tin Roof, published in 1983, and Life After Mississippi, published in 1989. And also he has written 2 books for which he's probably better known, which combine prose and poetry. Love and Profit, The Art of Caring Leadership, published in 1991, and Life and Work, A Manager's Search for Meaning, published last year. I'd like to share with you a brief passage from Jim's latest book, Life and Work, which I believe speaks to some of the themes in his talk today, and which he has chosen to title Love and Profit, Finding the Balance in Life and Work. In this section of the book, he is talking about the importance of self-awareness. Jim Autry writes, quote, "What self-awareness must lead to is a letting go of the illusion of control and a letting go of ego, both of which mean a letting go of or a change in the concept of power. This results in a way of treating people that emphasizes, above anything else, honesty, trust, and special treatment according to people's individual, special human needs."
Thank you. It's good to be here with all of you. How about it? Am I on? Okay. I had to get my signal from the cameraman. I'm considerably wired up here, so my mobility is sort of restricted. Andy, as a result of my being son and grandson of Baptist ministers, I am a Congregationalist. You know, I figured that's enough Baptist in the family. Well, I'm here to talk with you, obviously, about leadership, and I'll focus most specifically on business leadership, although I think what I have to say extends to any institution, nonprofit, educational, and any others. Leadership in the business context usually starts with management. And as I say to my business audiences, the real shift from management to leadership is a leap from the external to the internal. And yet, being a good business leader requires an understanding, an acceptance, and a mastery of all the management stuff as well. Well, both of these things, management and leadership, are terribly challenging, frustrating, gut-wrenching, nervous-making, sleep-depriving callings. Well, to begin to talk about this frustrating and difficult challenge, I'm going to read a poem. They leave a lot out of the personnel handbooks. Dying, for instance. You can find funeral leave, but you can't find dying. You can't find what to do when a guy you've worked with since you both were pups looks you in the eye and says something about hope and chemotherapy. No phrases, no triplicate forms, no rating systems. Seminars won't do it. and it's too late for a new policy on sabbaticals. They don't tell you about eye contact and how easily it slips away when a woman who lost a breast says they didn't get it all. You can find essays on motivation, but the business schools don't teach what the good manager says to keep people taking up the slack while someone steals a little more time at the hospital. There's no help from those tapes you pop into the players while you drive or jog. They would never get the voice right. And this poem won't help either. You just have to figure it out for yourself. And don't ever expect to do it well. So my first question for you this morning is, where did we get all this tough guy stuff? That somehow we are to leave our emotions out of the workplace, that we're to be drill sergeants with our employees and save all the soft stuff for home and family and friends. When did we come to believe that there was life and there was work, as if those two are separate, as if one of those is not inextricably part of the other? How many of you grew up on or around farms? A lot of you. I did too. In fact, if you grew up in Mississippi, that's all you can do. Well, think of it. I mean, you know in your heart how absurd it is on the face of it to think that there'd be a separation between life and work in that farm setting. Life was work, work was life. Can you imagine anything sillier than a farmer coming in from the field and a spouse saying, "Honey, we need to talk. Your work is interfering with our relationship"? Not likely. Not likely. Regardless how we got all those notions about work, it's time to put them aside. Past time to get rid of them. And time to bring our management and leadership techniques and philosophies and theories into congruence with what we say we believe and into congruence with what really goes on at work. Now, what really goes on at work? A better question is what doesn't? Everything. Everything goes on at work. Every emotion there is. Fear, anger, jealousy, hostility, celebration, joy, and a lot of love. That goes on at work. Every emotion of life is at work because work is life and life is work. The next question I have for you is, how many of you have asked yourselves, how do I find a balance between my life and my work? I did that a long time ago. You know something? That's the wrong question. The question is, how do I find a balance within my life and my work? Not between, within. Now there he is. He's a poet. He's a writer. He's doing semantic tricks. Not true. All the difference in the world in those prepositions. If we cling to finding the balance between, we are clinging to the old dualism. You know, when the Industrial Revolution took that farmer off the land and into that industrial workplace, we set up this being at home, being at work, being at home, being at work, so that in that geographical dualism, we also set up, I submit to you, a psychological, an emotional, and a spiritual dualism, so that we could be different people in different places. And we allowed ourselves to be different people in different places. And we still do, all over this country, in business particularly. One of the most offensive phrases to me in the English language is, "It's just business." We can do that. It's just business. Just business. You know, at the heart of the American story is the opportunity for individuals, economic opportunity. Now, if you believe that, then believe this. I believe that business, which has enormous potential for good, is at the heart of that American story. Business provides those economic opportunities. It could be right there at the heart of the story, providing individual economic opportunity. So if you trivialize it, denigrate it as just business, you do that to the heart of the American story. It reminds me of those Godfather movies. Joe, I know you're We've been friends. We played together as children. I was the best man at your wedding. Do you understand? It's just business. Boom. Commit an injustice in the name of business and commit an injustice in the name of anything. But it rose out of those dualisms. It's not the way life is. And we keep trying to keep them separated. I ask you, as I ask my business audiences, how many of you have friends at work? Okay. How many of you have really close, intimate friends at work? People to whom you tell almost anything. Don't be crazy about it, but almost anything. Now, can you imagine having a problem at home, a sick child? A spouse awaiting the results of a biopsy? Can you imagine not taking that to work? Not sharing that with those intimate friends? Not knowing that they're going to support you there, that maybe they're going to sweep up after you a little bit because you may not be the most productive worker in the place during that time? Of course not. You've done it for them, they do it for you. Just as when you have a problem at work, you take it home, you share it with your partner. It's the way life is. Life is integrated. Life is not segregated, but we keep trying to segregate it. So the challenge is to find the balance within life and work. How do we do that? I don't have all the answers to that, but I think it begins with trying to live life in a way we would call holistic, and being a whole person and realizing that every event, every episode, and most important, every relationship, whether that is with a spouse or child or friend or vendor or customer or employee or colleague, must be met as a whole person with all our values intact. Because that's the subject. The subject is values. Values. We can't say when I'm home, well, I'm going to put on my spouse and my parent hat and I'll deal with those problems. I'm going to put on my boss hat, I'll deal with that. That's rigid, machine-like, procedural, and it robs us of being the best we can be in every situation. But this is a hard story to tell to business, and it's hard to get accepted. If you have an employee who has a problem with a sick child, do you approach that as a parent yourself with compassion and understanding and support to help that employee through this period? Or do you support that? Do you approach that as a manager, as a department head charged with getting the work done? We've got to get the work done regardless. You know what the answer to that question is? Both. Both. You have to be compassionate and supportive and understanding. You have to get the work done. See, there are great paradoxes of leadership. And that's what leadership is, embracing the paradoxes to a great extent. The paradoxes are that you have to do both. It's not an either-or world. It's a both-and world. I often say to people speaking at business schools, look, if you can't love and care about and support people, shouldn't get into it, because you have to love and care about and support people, and you have to fire people, and sometimes it's the same people. That's the deadening, awful paradox. Of course, I believe in a leadership that can avoid a lot of that firing too. I believe that leadership is largely a matter of paying attention. I believe that life is largely a matter of paying attention. I used to write a lot of notes when I was running the magazine group at Meredith. Had 900 people. So I'd write the notes. It wasn't a gimmick. I wanted people to know I was in touch and paying attention. And it didn't have to be about you doing a great job, Bill. It could be, congratulations on winning the golf tournament, or your child being named a merit scholar, or any number of things. I'd write these little notes. I remember I wrote a note to the woman in Iowa who's the first person to win the lottery. Just don't talk about the lottery. That's a subject I don't like. But she won the lottery, $5,000, front page of the paper, first person to win the new Iowa lottery. So I wrote her a note. I said, well, I hope you won't take your winnings and go live off of them, because we need you around here. Now, Several years later, at my retirement reception in the cafeteria, there's a receiving line and there are flowers and a sign-in book and music. It's as close to your own funeral as you ever want to get during your lifetime. This woman's in the line, tears in her face. "I'll never forget that note," she said. "I'll never forget that note. It was so important to me." It made me realize once again how powerful our words are. You know, how powerful our words are in dealing with the people we try to lead. It's our number one tool. I mean, you got your computers and your faxes and all that stuff. Those are reasonably good tools. But your number one tool is that vocabulary, those words that you use. And never underestimate the power of the words. I went in one morning to write a note to a woman in a very tragic circumstance. Couldn't write the note. I ended up writing this poem instead. It's entitled, "On Trying to Write a Note to an Employee Whose Baby Died of SIDS." I've written a million little notes by hand on these personal pads about new jobs and promotions and raises, about babies born, about triumphs of all kinds, from college degrees to bowling trophies. And I have written, of course, about deaths in the family. But there are times when I know that anything I say will fall short, when any word I choose will be wrong. I think now of my little boy, so few years ago in his crib, and how I would check him in the night, fearful as ever that good things live always in peril, cupping my hand around his head, watching for the breaths which it seemed to me could so easily stop. And I think of how it would have felt to wait for a breath that did not come again. I think being able to relate our own humanity to our employees and our colleagues' humanity, not just on matters as serious as death, but on other matters as well, should be natural, common sense, an ordinary impulse of people who, for the most part, claim faith in other aspects of their lives. But I'm just amazed at how many managers and leaders in business look for the answers to these situations in the policy manuals, in the handbooks. They are not there. They're here. Just as I'm amazed with all the talk of all the new management stuff around the world, how many people at the top of companies still maintain the old macho, command, control, top-down way of maintaining power and managing people. I had a CEO say to me, "My job is to create stress." He actually said it to me. "My job is to create stress." It wasn't 15 minutes. He wasn't complaining about the high cost of health care claims. I thought, does this guy ever read anything? Does he know the connection? You read these articles in the Wall Street Journal or Fortune or Forbes or someplace. It's always about a man. His CEO has given new meaning to the term tyrant. Down in a story somewhere, they'll quote his spouse and children, and they'll say, "Oh, he's just a pussycat around the house." Think that's delivering your same values wherever you are? You think that's a heart attack coming? I suggest to you that the key to finding the balance within our life and work and helping our employees find that balance is purely and simply a matter of paying attention to and living our values wherever we are, in every situation. I always have to say before I get written off as some sort of new age manager who spent too much time in California hot tubs since his retirement. But there are strong organizational and business purposes for the kind of leadership I believe in. Strong purposes. I don't think anything exists in business or endures without having strong and powerful business and organizational purposes. And the purposes start this way: to find and keep good people and to make them more productive. I mean, in a business sense, that's what we're after. Well, for most of us, that means information, service, knowledge workers. There was a book written around the turn of the century by Frederick Taylor called Scientific Management. How many of you have read that? Those of you who haven't, don't bother. But it set up all the time motion stuff, you know, and what it said was that to get productivity, you needed capital and technology. Those were the factors of production: capital and technology, money and machines. You want to get the productivity of it, you throw money and machines into there. But it was after World War II that Peter Drucker wrote, no, in knowledge and information and service work and the kind of society we're becoming and going to become, the factors of production are not money and machines, it's management. Management. And Drucker said this too. Management lives and works in and for an institution. And that institution is a human community, bound together by the bond that is second only in its strength to the bond of family, the work bond. Second only in its strength to the bond of family, the work bond. If you grew up on and around farms, you understand that. We all know these stories. I live in Iowa. I bet there's one a year. The farmer's very sick or an accident, amputation or something, and the neighbors get together and they plow and they cultivate and they plant and they cultivate and they harvest and they take the crop to market and they deliver the money to the family. Bound in the bond of work. So what an incredible opportunity for business leaders to guide and direct people in this bond of mutual enterprise and to create a place. You see, I think there are two kinds of managers. I guess one's a manager and one's a leader. You know what they say, there are two kinds of people in the world. Those who say there are two kinds of people in the world and all the others. But there's the manager who believes that management is some technical skill which, when practiced properly, will guide and direct people for the good of the enterprise. The leader who's made that leap to the internal sees leadership and management as a calling, as a sacred trust in which people's well-being is in your care during most of their waking hours. Think about that. And who combines these technical and administrative skills with compassion and vision and honesty and trust and courage in order to create a place. And that, my friends, is the operative phrase, to create a place in which people can do good work, can share in a common good, can share in the rewards, not just the financial and the professional rewards, which are important, but the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual rewards of a job well done. See, I like to say Karl Marx got it wrong. Marx said that the industrial society was alienating us from the products of our labor. I don't think that was it. I think it was alienating us from the meaning of our work. What do we deserve from our work? What do any of us deserve from our work? Meaning, purpose, nobility, dignity. That's what we deserve. Whether we're the CEO or the mailroom clerk, whether we're riding in the limousine talking on the cellular phone or we're driving the limousine, we deserve meaning, purpose, dignity, nobility. We deserve it. And that's what the leader does. The leader, Andy said this, the leader provides that meaning. You see, we all know the old story about it's a cliche about the bricklayers, and one says he's laying bricks and the other says he's building a cathedral. You know, but the leader's job is to connect this vision up here, what we're trying to do together, with what you do, with what I do. Make me find meaning and connection in what I do. And it doesn't matter what the work is. Driving the courier van, delivering the mail. We can find meaning in it. Well, another reason for what I'm talking about, and that is the covenant has been broken. The covenant in America has been broken. What was the covenant? Jim, you come here, you work hard, you do a good job, we'll take care of you. I knew if I went there, worked hard, did a good job, they'd take care of me. I was with the same company for 30 out of the 32 years of my professional life. You're not going to see much of that anymore. Now I know if I go there, work hard, do a good job, they'll lay me off. It may not have anything to do with how good a job I did. It may have something to do in Hong Kong. And I'm not here to debate the merits of the downsizing. I think some of it was very necessary for survival. I will debate how it was done, how poorly it was done, and I will debate those CEOs who like to announce we're going to lay off 25,000 people and the stock jumps $1 the next day. That's another subject, but I'd be happy to talk about it at a coffee break if you want to. Well, but what's happened is it's broken the covenant. And what have the companies lost? Well, they say loyalty. I had a CEO say to me, "Whatever happened to good old-fashioned employee loyalty?" I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying, "Well, I think you laid him off, you dope." But that's not what the companies lost. You see, that really wasn't very important. Because what loyalty often played out as in the workplace was loyalty to me. My people are loyal to me. Individual managers, my people are loyal to me. And the big ego stuff there, big power, big control stuff. That was not what was important. I don't want them loyal to me. I want them loyal to what we are doing together. See, what the companies have lost is that connection between what we are doing and what I'm doing. My understanding that if we do well, I do well. See, now I know if we do well, I can be laid off. We've lost that connection, that powerful connection with the well-being of this community of work and my well-being. It is a crisis of trust of monumental proportions in corporate America today. And some of them are just waking up to it. But wait. What are all the gurus saying? If you have not heard the word empowerment in the past week, you can leave now. We've got to empower people. Got to reward risk-taking. Got to reward mistakes. And we've got to move decision-making to the lowest levels of competency. It's like a chant. This is a Catholic group is connected to the Catholic Church. I'll do it the way I always do it. We've got to move decision-making to the lowest level of competence and work to make the lowest levels competent. I spoke to the sisters of St. Francis Hospital System, and they did that, and it just all went crazy. They loved it. But we say that. It's like a little chant. But let me ask you this question. I'm sitting there, and I know that thousands of my friends and neighbors and peers and colleagues all over this country have lost their jobs. And did you know this, that in the latest survey I saw, that job security has surpassed crime as the greatest anxiety among working Americans? Job security. So I know my people have been laid off all over the country, and I think, I've got a great idea. This idea could make the company a lot of money. It's kind of an innovation. It's kind of different. It's a bit of a risk. But I know that they're rewarding risk and rewarding mistakes, so I'll just go on with that. Anybody here believe that? I don't. We're losing the innovation that we're trying to get. And it has a terrible, terrible dark side to it about homicides and workplace violence. So what's the new covenant? I don't have all the answers to that either. I think there are two important elements. One is that we become educorps, that companies realize that if we can't guarantee people employment, we have to guarantee them to be employable by keeping their skills up to date and have strong education programs. But the second and most important lies right with the individual manager leaders, and that is to create a place of support and not of fear. It's time to write the last chapter to management by fear, and yet it's still out there. We need places of support and not of fear. What we have to do in leadership positions is we have to rethink the way it's always been. We can't think of ourselves as the boss there to motivate the people so they will do the work and accomplish our goals and make us look good. We have to think of ourselves as a resource, and in this language, as a servant, there to help people do their own best work in this community of work. Find meaning and dignity in that work and purpose, accomplish their goals, and in so doing, accomplish our goal, which we have articulated as the vision of what we're trying to do. That's what we have to do, and that requires an environment of support and not of fear. This is tough for people. This letting go of the ego, this redefining. I mean, you go through business school, you work in a company, you work your way up, somebody beats on you all the time, you get promoted to a position. What do you want to do? You want to do it the way it's always been done. It takes enormous courage to say, all right, I'm going to support people. Regardless of what my boss says, I'm going to support people. I want to share with you 3 things that I think are important in doing that. I call them 3 techniques or philosophies, workings of leadership. Actually, it's all the same thing, but I found in making talks it's better if you have them 1, 2, 3 than people like that. The first thing is honesty. Now, honesty sounds simple, doesn't it? You know how hard it is to be honest? And I'm not just talking about the honesty of what I say, because I can fiddle with that. I'm talking about the honesty of feelings. The honest expression of emotions in a workplace. But I'm not talking about anger. You know, how do we feel about what we're doing? I consult in this country and in Australia, and wherever I go, the number 1 failing of managers is the inability, the unwillingness, the fear of saying, Jim, you're not doing a good job. You got to do this and this, do better. We'll talk about that in a minute. They don't do it. And it costs organizations, whether that's businesses or nonprofits, millions of dollars. We think of all the ways in the world to not have to deal with this deficiency. A couple of my favorites. One is we create jobs. We create departments. Say, Jim, got a great job for you. I'm going to make you coordinator. Now, my apologies to all the real coordinators in the room. Going to make you coordinator. Get old Jim out of the way. Get somebody in there who can do the job. About a year later, we've got difficulty with Shirley. Shirley, going to make you Jim's assistant. You know, about 5 years, Jim thinks coordination is a real department and wants to be made vice president of coordination. This really happens, folks. We create these white elephant departments, and it costs huge amounts of dollars, and it is dishonest, and it is unfair to Jim because we don't give him the chance to do better, and to all the people around Jim who've sort of been sweeping up after him. What you send the signal is, tell you what, if you're incompetent, we'll reward you, make a special job for you. Dishonest, unfair. Another way we like to do it is we like to say we've got a friend, Andy's got a department, he's got an opening in his department. Say, Andy, old Jim would do a great job for you. Shuffle off to Buffalo, we call that. Well, that's not honest, and it's unfair. Another way we fail to be honest in organizations, and I think this is where the ego comes into play again, is we keep secrets. We don't give people the information they need to do their work. We keep secrets. Why do we keep secrets? Answer: power accrues to those who have the secrets. If you have the secrets, you have the power. See a few heads nodding. I have news for you. If you have the secrets and you have the power, how does anybody in the world know you have the power because you have the secrets? I'll tell you how they know. You call in your right-hand person. You say, Larry, I trust you completely, Larry. I want you to know this. Don't tell anybody. Larry now has some of the power because Larry has the secrets. How does anybody know that Larry has the power because he has the secret? He has to tell somebody the secret. There are no secrets in organizations. Believe me, it's true. There are none. I learned more from the secretarial grapevine than from all the personal confidential memos I ever received. If you don't believe me, go downtown to Indianapolis, go into any office building, walk up to the receptionist and say, what's going on around here? You'll be stunned. Do you know that in intelligence gathering, it's not about James Bond and little tiny cameras and sneaking around with guns. It's about reading newspapers and talking to people. That's what most intelligence work is. There are no secrets. And do away with the concept. That is a way we keep power. Information is the single most nurturing element in any organization. And if people don't get the information they need, they just make it up. They patch together what they have, they make it up. The CEO says, where did all these rumors come from? Because you're not telling people what's going on. Listen, nobody ever did a worse job from having too much information. This is very difficult to convince businesses of. Secrecy in businesses is just absurd. But nobody ever did a worse job from having too much information. If you're going to give people information, you have to trust them. And that's the second and most difficult thing. Trust, trust, trust. You have to trust them. See, I believe people want to do a good job. And I think they will do a good job if you trust them to do a good job. That's the law. Here's a little corollary. Not everybody wants to do a good job. Not everybody can accept trust. We'll talk about that later. You see, I'm a trained skeptic. I mean, my degree is in journalism. I have a BA in skepticism. But I learned 15 years ago that I could choose to put aside my skepticism, my cynicism, and I could choose to live my life and manage my business, not for the worst among us, not for the worst within us, but the best among us and the best within us. But most of the time in management, we don't do that. We're constantly managing for the worst among us. We do it in any number of ways. We do it in, my favorite one is policies. We write these policies. We see somebody doing something wrong, and rather than going out there and saying, Jim, stop it, we write a policy so everybody will stop doing it. Most of them are saying, geez, I would never consider doing this. So here's what happens. I had a vice president for operations, new VP for operations about 10 or 12 years ago. Harvard Business School guy, very straight, wonderful man. I said, Chris, I want you to go through all our personnel policies and throw out the silly ones. And Harvard Business School, he said, how will I know the silly ones? I said, they are the ones we've written to keep everybody from doing what only a few people are going to do, and they're going to do it anyway. So institutionally, we send out signals of distrust. We don't trust you, we don't trust you, we don't trust you. Here, don't do this. Of course, you'd never consider doing it, but don't do it anyway. We do it personally. I have a department with 30 people, and I know that Jim and Sally are not doing what they should be doing. Maybe they can't accept trust. Maybe they don't want to do a good job. Maybe we haven't achieved clarity. Maybe they don't know what they're supposed to do. What do? Call my 30 people together and I say, it has come to my attention that some of you, if you're in the military, they say some of you and you know who you are not doing such and such. Now, what's going on there? There are 28 people sitting there saying, is that jerk so dense he doesn't know it's Jim and Sally? I mean, they knew it. See, they knew it before I did. There are no secrets. They're thinking, does he so distrust me that he thinks I would do that? See that signal? Jim and Sally sitting there thinking, well, everybody else must be doing it. We can keep on getting by with it. Dishonest, unfair, untrusting. Trust has great power. Great power. In the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, it says, if you do not trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. I was making a speech a couple of years ago at the Leadership Institute at Southern Cal. I was on the program, got to hear him. He was receiving an award, and in his acceptance speech, he was speaking, and he said at one point, "My father imposed upon me the greatest discipline." Well, here I am, BA in skepticism. My tapes began to roll. I think, oh, that's one of these guys had to walk 5 miles through the snow to school. His father spanked him every day, whether he needed it or not. He said, he trusted me. My father imposed upon me the greatest discipline. He trusted me. It is enormous discipline. People want to do a good job, and they will do a good job if you trust them to do a good job. It means the leap from the external to the internal. It means the letting go of ego. It means the letting go of the illusion of control. And as I say to business managers, all of you who think you have control instead of the illusion, answer this question. Do you control your children? Well, if we're going to be honest and trust people, there's another thing we have to do. We have to lead people one at a time. Not in groups, one at a time. That means give people special treatment. Now, you can imagine how much trouble this gets me into. Because as soon as I say special treatment, every lawyer in the room, his hair goes up on the back of his head. Whoa! No special treatment. Got to treat everybody the same. That is not true, ladies and gentlemen. It is not true. You have to give everybody fair and equitable treatment, but you don't have to treat everybody the same. It's not what the law says. Special treatment. I knew in the Air Force, I knew that if I wanted something out of the ordinary, something special, and I were to go to my squadron commander and ask for it, he would say, "Lieutenant Autry, if we did that for you, we'd have to do it for everybody." I always wanted to say, "No, sir, you could do that just for me." And what would he have said? Other than get out of the office, nobody gets special treatment around here. Well, the new slogan is everybody gets special treatment around here. Everybody. We've been giving special treatment a long time in business, folks. Who do you know? What club do you belong to? What school did you go to? What color are you? What gender are you? You able or disabled? Been given a lot of special treatment. That's where all the laws came from. I'm talking about responding to people's individual human needs. Making exceptions in work rules, hours. If we don't come to grips with child care, daycare, elder care, family leave, all these things that the government keeps wanting to push down businesses' throat as they back off of it, if we don't be, as they like to say, proactive and come to grips with those, we're not going to be able to be globally competitive, one of the very current good phrases. We won't be able to be, because we won't be able to find and keep good people and make them more productive. AT&T has something they call the virtual office. People work at home. They equip them with the computer technology and all the electronic hookups to work at home. You see what they're doing? Through good management, they're using technology and capital to respond to people's individual human needs and create an environment in which they can do good work and be productive and share in it and still be at home if they need to be. This is not hard to do. I did it for 20 years. And you know something? Employees don't resent it. That's one of the things we hide behind. Oh, if we do that for you, I shouldn't really resent it. They don't resent it. They like it. They know when their turn comes, they can apply and get special treatment as well. This is a very important concept. A very important concept. I'm going to quote Peter Drucker one more time. This is the best definition of leadership. He said, and it's not a quote, it's a paraphrase. I can't remember the exact words. He said, the leader's abiding challenge is to make people's strengths effective and to make their weaknesses irrelevant. Is that wonderful or what? To make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. He didn't say we all have the same strengths and weaknesses. We have in corporations, we have got to get past this nonsense we have of all my people are outstanding. All your people are not outstanding. They all have strengths and weaknesses. The job of the leader is to support those people so that their strengths shine, their weaknesses are diminished, and that we help one another. These with these strengths and these with these weaknesses match up, help one another. That is a community of work. It's not a team in which we're trying to beat somebody. It's a community of work. That's what I mean by special treatment. Be present, extend yourself, address life beyond business, or at least be willing to listen to subjects beyond business. When I say be present, you know how you go in and somebody's head down and inbox is full and there's these pink call slips all over this, and looks up and says, "What do you want?" That is not being present. Not what I mean. Well, I'm often asked if I've written a poem. You can tell he's leading up to a poem that talks about this. And I have. What does a leader do every day? Not just all this theory, philosophy. What does it do every day? The important things, and I call it threads. Sometimes you just connect, like that. No big thing maybe, but something beyond the usual business stuff. It comes and goes quickly, so you have to pay attention. A change in the eyes when you ask about the family, a pain flickering behind the statistics about a boy and a girl in school, or about seeing them every other Sunday. An older guy talks about his bride, a little affectation after 25 years. A hot-eyed achiever laughs before you want him to. Someone tells about his wife's job or why she quit working to stay home. An old joker needs another laugh on the way to retirement. A woman says she spends a lot of her salary on an au pair, and a good one is hard to find, but worth it because there's nothing more important than the baby. Listen. In every office, you hear the threads of love and joy and fear and guilt, the cries for celebration and reassurance. And somehow, you know that connecting those threads is what you're supposed to do, and business takes care of itself. Two characteristics I want you to have. Courage. Have courage. Be brave. It takes a lot of courage to be a leader. You know, you're always on the tightrope. If you're in a company, you're always caught between the people you're representing. It's one of your jobs. And the company you're representing. The people reporting to you and the upper management of the company. You're on the tightrope between those groups, and neither group ever thinks you're doing it well enough. It's a tightrope. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to be there, to be present. It takes a lot of emotional stamina to listen to the stories. Everyone wants to tell his story or her story. You've got to listen to the stories. It takes courage to deal with old Jim who's not doing a good job. You're not doing a good job, Jim. Our society is built greatly on this dynamic tension between the rights of the group and the rights of the individual. And we have systems of governance, and who's in the Congress, who's on the courts, that keep that. We sort of go back and forth over that. Over the years, it's a defining tension in America. But on the job every day, you don't have those systems of governance. Those city policies don't help. It's you in this leadership position. You're the one who's got to say, gee, with all my support, all my caring, all my trust, all my honesty, all my special treatment, this person either so misunderstands or so abuses what we're doing that those rights have imposed on the rights of the group, to the extent that I've got to say, Jim, you're not doing a good job. You know, I know a lot of people who think that being tough, I mean, they say that, oh, you're into soft management. I've heard a lot of that. Soft? You know what a lot of people think being tough is? How loud you raise your voice, how hard you hit the desk. That's being tough. That's not tough. That's nonsense. That's absolute, abject cowardice. That's what that is. That's erecting a shield of intimidation that nobody can get through. Don't give him any bad news. Woo, he does not like bad news. Don't surprise her, she says. Do anything, but don't surprise me. I don't know about you, friends, but I live in a world of bad news and surprises. It's one of the things we have to deal with in leadership positions. But the tough guys erect this shield of intimidation. They don't extend themselves beyond it, and nobody else is allowed to extend beyond it to them. That's not toughness. That's cowardice. Real toughness is having high standards, high expectations, achieving clarity about what's to be done. And this is so important. I believe in those tools like job descriptions and performance standards and those things. They're helpful tools. I believe in that. Achieve that clarity. And then support people, give them the resources they need, care about them. And if they can't do it, fire them. Because courageous, loving, caring, servant leadership requires, in the greatest of paradoxes, having to do that. What I hope is that the kind of leadership you establish and the environment you establish, that you do have to do a lot less of that. I always used to say, Jim, you're not doing a good job. What's wrong? Always ask, what's wrong? I mean, part of leadership is learning to keep quiet. Did you know that? Learning to keep quiet. It was such a hard thing for me to do. I used to have to fill in the conversational blanks. You can't imagine how many bad hires I've made over the years because I brought in this candidate for a job and I said, what do you think about this? The candidate was silent. I jumped in, said a lot of stuff. The candidate smiled, nodded. I thought, pretty smart. Learn to be quiet. As I like to say to managers, don't just do something, sit there. Jim knows what's wrong, and I won't go through that whole process with you. But it has to be done with love and caring and support and with enormous generosity. If you have to err when you have to fire somebody, err on the side of generosity, always. But it has to be done. The next thing is self-awareness. Self-awareness and self-esteem. And I think a lot of that, this is a huge subject, but a lot of it has to do with being able to find meaning in what you do. Be present, be centered, be grounded, live in the present. How many of you ever were sick as children and threw up? I'm serious about this. This is a serious question now. How many of you remember being sick as a child and throwing up in the bathroom at night and your mother's coming in and taking a cool cloth and putting it on your forehead and rubbing your back and comforting you? How many remember your mothers doing that? Raise your hands. Hands down. How many of you remember your fathers doing that? Better than average group by far. Well, for those of you who don't, just think what an opportunity for connection and intimacy and personal growth your fathers missed. Now, I first heard that question put to me at an American Association of Advertising Agencies conference, and not a hand in the room went up. Had a profound impact on me. Now, I have sons 38, 35, and 11. At the time, my 11-year-old was an infant, maybe a month old. So I went home from this conference and I said, Sally, I'm changing my ways. See, with my 35 and 38-year-olds, I could not change those wretched diapers. I mean, I have this very delicate olfactory sense, you see. Never mind that their poor mother had to do that. I could not do that. And so I didn't very much, as little as I could get by with. So I came in and said, Sally, let me out those diapers. So I remember the little boy Ronald was lying there, his innocence, looking up. I'm changing and dealing with his diapers, saying, oh, Ronald, sonny, I love you so much. I just know that I'm growing personally from this. And you know something? I was, and I did, and I do. And in the middle of the night with the throwing up, I'm there. You see, A lot of people say, well, I get a lot of success, make some money, get some position. Then I'll worry about finding meaning. We get to meaning later, right? Get to success first, meaning next. You know, you got to take it along with you. If you try to find meaning in everything you do, you will imbue everything you do with meaning. Changing the diapers, cutting the grass, walking the dog, budget meetings, review sessions, strategic planning. We can imbue everything we do with meaning if we have a sense of ourselves, self-awareness, self-esteem, balance, centered, groundedness. If we realize that to live in the past, as the Buddhists say, if you're angry, you're living in the past. If you're fearful, you're living in the future. Live in the now. Learn from the past. Plan for the future. Live in the present, today. Be present. I love the story about the Zen monk who's walking along. He's chased by a tiger. He runs. He comes to a cliff. Fortunately, there's a vine over the cliff. So he scrambles and lets himself down on this vine, leaving the tiger behind. He looks down. At the bottom of the cliff, there's another tiger. So it's got a tiger above, a tiger below, hanging by the vine. Out of a crevice comes this tiny mouse, begins chewing on this vine. So there he is. Tiger above, tiger below, hanging on the vine, mouse chewing on the vine. He looks to the right, nothing. He looks to the left. He sees a wild strawberry vine with one red, ripe, luscious strawberry. So holding on to there, he reaches over and he picks that strawberry. And he eats it. And he enjoys it. That's nowness, folks. It may be a little extreme, but that is living in the moment. Now, wait a minute. We are all trapped between the tiger of the past and the tiger of the future. We are hanging on to our perception of reality. Sure as shooting, some irritating thing is going to come chew away at our perception of reality one of these days. And what are you going to do then? Huh? I know what some of you do. You'll get busier. Let's get busy. You know, I have a friend who says, I'm flattered when people say, you're so busy. You know I can't get an appointment with you. You're busy. Yes, I used to be that way. I'm a busy man. I can hardly take time to see you. I was flattered by it. It was a compliment. Because we can do a lot of stuff. But I'll tell you, we get to the point it just feels awful. And what do we call it? We say, well, it's burnout. It's not burnout. That's not what it is. The burnout is not a crisis of time. It is a crisis of the spirit. It's not that you can't do it. We can bite off so much and chew it, you can't believe it. We are capable of doing enormous work. It's not that we bite off more than we can chew. The danger comes when we bite off more than we can savor. Live in the present. Be there. Be there for yourself. Be there for your employees. Now, I would not want you to think that you've been listening to this lecture by St. James the Perfect. I really proud of my business career. I took this group with $160 million. When I left 10 years later, we had $500 million. Went from 4 magazines to 17. I'm proud of that record. But I just made a place in which people did good work. I didn't learn anything I know from scholarship. Wish I had scholarship or being a consultant. Only from doing it and making mistakes. And I did everything that I've told you not to do. But we are involved in an art. Leadership is an art, as Max Dupree said that. Not a science. If they could put it in computers and get an answer, they wouldn't need us. But it's filled with false starts and mistakes, as well as wonderful times when you get to the end of the day and you realize, I did it well today. When I express my emotions about leadership, it's through poetry. I opened with a poem, and I have time to close with a couple of poems. This is the first business poem I wrote. I had been to New York to shut down one of those white elephant departments. 4 guys about my age at the time. And the company was going to treat them generously from a financial viewpoint, and they were going to get the dignity and the celebration they deserved. But in the midst of that meeting, I could tell I was taking a great part of who they perceived themselves to be, part of their lives. So on the way back to the corporate headquarters, I started writing this poem. And it was the first business poem I wrote. It led to my books, Love and Profit, and Life and Work, called On Firing a Salesman. It is like a little murder, taking his life, his reason for getting on the train, his lunches at fancy restaurants, and his meetings in warm and sunny places where they all gather, these smiling men in sherbet slacks and blue blazers, and talk about business, but never about prices, never breaking that law about the prices they charge. But what about the prices they pay? What about gray evenings in the bar car and smoke-filled clothes and hair and children already asleep and wives who say you stink when they come to bed? What about the promotions they don't get, the good accounts they lose to some kid because somebody up there thinks their energy is gone? What about those times they see in a mirror or the corner of their eye some guy at the club shake his head when they walk through the locker room, the way they shook their heads years ago at an old duffer whose handicap had grown along with his age? And what about this morning, the summons, a closed door, somebody shaved and barbered and shined, 15 years their junior, trying to put on a sad face and saying he understands? A murder with no funeral. Nothing but those quick steps outside the door, those set jaws, those confident smiles, that young disregard for even the thought of a salesman's mortality. So I finished this poem I had started working on. It is about the nature of time, and it's called simply Retirement. It is early, 6:30. The building is quiet. I came in to write letters and to pack. Soon the place will come to life as it always does with the rush of people working. These days, though, it's the smaller, slower things I notice. The droning of fans and compressors, keeping us warm or cool. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the burble of the big percolator, and the smell of coffee. As the time here grows shorter, I find myself thinking of other times when I could not wait for the day or the week to be over. The times I strained toward Christmas or vacation. I think of meetings that would never end, of hours stuck on a taxiway, airliners lined up as far as I could see, of those eternal minutes right before someone was to come into my office to be fired. I understand now why every writer who ever lived wrote about time and its paradoxes. And everything they ever said about how fast time passes is true. But they never told us how many slow days we would have to endure before we realized how fast they had gone. You've been a wonderful audience, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your kind attention. I look forward to participating with you in the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jim. We have a little time left here, and Jim has agreed to take questions. We don't have a microphone in the audience, so if you could please stand up if you have a question and state it loudly, and we'll ask Jim to repeat it.
There is a real good quality in terms of, a lot of times I'm a consultant, and I see where people are angry and they don't express it. So there's somehow, I would love to have you talk a little bit about how do you put the soul into the expression of the anger in a way where it's not diminishing. But it's something I've been working with a lot, and it's very tricky.
Well, I counsel people on this, and what I counsel is that they not be angry, but they have an. Did everybody hear the question? Yeah. That they choose an appropriate form for it, which I believe is language. And I know it's not that I don't think the language needs to be tainted with emotion, but what it really gets down to is the anger an authentic emotion about the situation, or it is a technique of intimidation. If it's a technique of intimidation, I will resort to the accoutrements of anger, which is yelling loud and all this. If it's used as a tool for intimidation, then it's not an authentic expression of anger. If it's an authentic expression of anger, I think people should say, look, that really makes me angry. You know, I'm containing myself, but I'm angry about this. And here's why I'm angry. And I believe in an authentic, appropriate expression of anger. What I don't like is when you use it to project an image of being tough. And so that's about the best I can say on that subject. But I don't try to suppress anger. I think that's bad. But it is the expression that's appropriate. There's an appropriate expression in the context of the workplace for all the emotions. And anger is one of the more difficult ones. Love is the other one. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Could you speak louder, please?
You were talking earlier about Peter Drucker's comment that the leader makes people's strengths more effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. The image that came to my mind was of a leader not having a desk or a phone or an office. They spend their time walking around helping 100 people be 1% more effective. Can you see a world like that ever?
What, did everybody hear the question? No, okay, he said that in the image of Drucker is making people's strengths effective and weaknesses irrelevant. He sort of sees an image of a leader not having an office or a desk, but just walking around making people 1% more effective. Do I ever see a world like that? Well, I think it was in Tom Peters' book, In Search of Excellence, that he talked about management by walking around. MBY. I forget the initials. My reaction to it was, you have to do that with a good deal of care. I think being in a company cafeteria, seeing people in the halls, and I think being accessible and always having the door to your office open and those kinds of things, accessibility is important. Going to places where you know there's difficulty and sitting down is important. But the problem with management by walking about is so many managers did it in a procedural, rigid way. They'll say, well, it's 3 o'clock, now is my walking about time. They'd go out and pop into the office, and here's some poor person trying to get the job done. You look up and say, holy Moses, what have I done? Here's the boss. You know, you immediately are worried. It has its downsides. I mean, part of trusting people to do their work is being accessible and available to them as they need you to be. And it doesn't mean, you know, looking over their shoulder, and I'm afraid that image would be a little too much over the shoulder looking. I also think that of course, being a Southerner, we all have a great sense of place, but I think you have to have your place. And I think the leader has to have his or her place that people can come to and find them. So I do see a time in which leaders spend all their time in supporting people through counseling, through being accessible, through intervening with the hierarchies that will always be there, through working out work arrangements as people need them. I see that day, but I don't think I see the one in which you've got the peripatetic leader just wandering around the place. And maybe I've trivialized what your intent was too. But did I make myself clear? Did I answer your question? Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't. That means they didn't answer my question. Yes, yes.
Can we go back to your earlier remarks about trust and policy manuals? Can you help us, can you talk a little bit about how we can help people whose vision of leadership is intensely focused on writing those manuals and who are keenly dedicated to improving the quality of behavior in an organization, but are absolutely rooted in putting it down on paper? How can we help people like that trust me?
Okay. Did everybody hear the question? Okay, the question was, going back to policy manuals and trust, how can we help people who are deeply rooted in writing policy manuals and dealing with behavior in an organization? How can we help them not be so rooted in writing policy manuals and putting it down? Well, hard question to answer, because a lot of people, that's their job description, you write the policy manuals. So you've got to go back farther than that to the whole philosophy in the company about what that's going to be. See, I believe that companies need procedures. procedures are fairly important in that they kind of sort of make the organization, they're sort of the grease of an organization, but they should be very mechanical and have only to do with matters that are of a purely administrative sort of nature. But then there are policies, and so many policies are set out to deal with people's behavior. And this is where I would focus my attention. The company I consult for in Australia has a little tiny vision manual, what we believe, who we are, what we believe. I've worked with them for years on this. And they don't have any policies about behavior because their attitude is, our vision is that we're going to treat one another fairly and openly, with honesty and compassion. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to do the legal thing, not just to the spirit, not just to the letter, but to the spirit of the law. And that's all they need to say. And I really believe that's all you need to say. But we have institutional structures which are driven by fear of lawsuit, basically. So I don't know that you can get to the answer to your question without getting way back into the structure and the attitudes that drive that. As we all know, having infinitely detailed policy books do not keep you from being sued, and they do not make you win suits. In fact, they often work against you. So I don't really know how to answer that question other than I just talk about it a lot. And I think that if you're in a position to influence people and talk to them about it, it's a subject that you should address. And the starting point is, these things don't do any good. These policies do not do any good. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question better than that. There was another hand over here, and then you, sir. Yes. You in the maroon sweater, yes.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm wondering if you just take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about how you can go about integrating the soul of leadership and the organization's political environment.
Yeah. Before I do that, does anybody have a hard question? If I can start at the top of a company, it's fairly easy. I mean, the two companies I consult for, I work with the CEOs. They're completely devoted to an open process of honesty and fair treatment and caring leadership. If you're not dealing at the top of the company, where the environment, a lot of that is created, then you have to deal in individual departments. And what I tell individual department heads who want to have servant leadership, caring leadership, is that you just have to do it. You just have to do it and trust your results. If the organization truly rewards you on results and evaluates you on results, then just trust the results and just do it and ignore the politics, the political environment. So much of the political environment of companies is just so much smoke and mirrors. I mean, we see people, you notice how in companies these hard-charging people are angling to get ahead, often don't get ahead? You know, why? Because the quality of the work isn't very good. You know, they may fall out of political favor. But one of the things I've said to my friends in the academy and universities is the political environment of business doesn't come close to the political environment of university. I mean, businesses, if anything good has happened out of all the restructuring and re-engineering and all that, and it's been a little good, but if anything good has happened, it has been to put much more emphasis on results and the quality of the work rather than who you know. Now, does that get rid of all of it? No. But my only suggestion to people is, as you know, Voltaire said, make your own garden grow. Do that in your place and trust the results. And realize you're taking a risk and you have to be courageous about it. But even the smallest work unit, you know, 6 people in a work team respond to the values that are manifest in that group. And that's really what it's about. Yes, sir. Yeah, you, sir.
Yes, Jim, you talked about sort of the fact that probably many of us experience that fear is still the rule, not the exception in the workplace. And I'm curious about two things. How do you speak with CEOs whose self-absorption has them not see the connection between their behavior and the source of the fear? And in terms of your own choosing of clients, when do you get to a point where you just sort of give up on a CEO as a lost cause with respect to that issue?
You're talking about me working with CEOs as a consultant. I can tell in 10 minutes whether it can go or not. The CEO has to be open to his or her own transformation. Absolutely. Must be. And what I won't do is work for a company where the CEO says, now, you come in and do all this stuff you do. I'm going to tour the world facility, stop off and play 18 holes at Augusta, and I'll come back and run this thing. If the CEO won't participate in the process that I establish, I just won't do it because it isn't going to work. And I think I just have to tell that pretty quickly. Some CEOs, a lot of CEOs, are still stuck in the old command control stuff. And the problem with being a CEO is you never get any accurate information. You get what everybody thinks you want to hear. And if you have an open environment, you can get good information. If you have this person on the throne environment, which exists in so many companies, you won't get good information. So they get this ego-driven, self-absorbed, important person, power in our society syndrome, and there's not much way to get through it. You know what I usually find? I find that the CEOs who are open to transformation have been through some personal crisis. I would love to say that we are all bound in a community of love because of our joys, but so often it's because of our pain. My friend Martin Marty at the University of Chicago says, my 11-year-old son has autism, and so, you just people, children with disabilities, I'm always running into them, and we're immediately loving one another. And Marty says, that's the fellowship of the wounded. And I think that when you find a CEO who has a child with a special need, a grandchild with a special need, a wife who's had cancer, has been through some, not necessarily his own physical thing, but some sort of transforming personal crisis, that CEO will frequently say, how am I going to do this differently? That's the time. The CEO of the company in Australia is a recovering alcoholic. He learned the power of love in the 12-step program. He said, I want to do that in my company. That's what I do for him. Use silence and circles and that. So you just can't force it on anybody. Yeah. Yes, sir. Last question.
This is a question to your answer to the previous question.
Good. I'm glad somebody else is giving answers.
I understand what you're saying about Voltaire saying how God measured by result. Do you have any ideas about balancing short-term and long-term results?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's a both-and world right now. That is really a hard question to answer without getting back at what's driving all the short-term things. And that is, of course, the financial markets. The change of ownership patterns of American businesses since 1970 has shifted so that now large funds own, I think 55% of American businesses are owned by large funds. We're talking up in the trillion. And these funds have this requirement. They have to provide funds now for the retirees who are collecting the pensions, and they have to grow to be able to provide funds in the future for the retirees who are going to be collecting those pensions. So they are pushing hard all the time for quarterly earnings. This has had a devastating effect on the business, and what those fund managers don't realize is that businesses are sacrificing the long term, those future pensions, for the short term. So you think, now couldn't the fund managers figure that out? The answer is no. Their reward systems are based on short term. And so when they talk to me and they say, well, we're watching out for all the widows and orphans and all the people who are going to collect me. Come on. This is about a few people making a lot of money. And that's what it is about. We have got to have some change, not in the financial markets, but in the reporting systems. Representative Gephardt read my books and called me about a speech he was making about trying to come up with a way to have best practices, best management practices in business, and to relieve them from some of the financial reporting obligations. You know, the Japanese say if we just change our markets to reporting annually rather than quarterly, we'd help on this problem. So it's a big structural problem. When you get right down to running the business, you really do have to be thinking short-term and long-term at the same time. But when the two come in conflict, I say you just have to be brave and work for the long term. You cannot hold the long term hostage to short-term results. And that's killing a lot of companies in this country. Some people are getting brave enough to deal with that. But let me just point out something that emphasizes how serious and difficult a problem this is. Do we all know about Eaton, who's the CEO of Chrysler? I mean, he has stashed $7 billion in cash. This is good. Everybody says Eaton is running it the way he ought to run it. He's got that cash because, sure as anything, car sales are going to drop, and he's going to need this reserve. So everybody's saying, good management. What's Wall Street saying? Stock goes just like this. They're saying, give us that, declare a dividend, buy back your stock, give us that money, don't hoard that cash. And Krikorian, whom I call the Dr. Kevorkian of business, comes in and he wants to use that cash to buy Chrysler. Now what do you think is going to happen the next time Chrysler gets in trouble? They'll go to the government and say, bail us out. And you know, it just sort of boggles the mind. The market has too much control over us. Because my view of it is if we just start ignoring them, if all the CEOs in the country said, we're not going to play that game anymore, we could change it, but that's not going to happen. We need some structural shifts. Individually, day to day, I'm saying to people, never hold the long-term hostage to the short term. It's ruining the country. It's ruining our politics. It's ruining our civil discourse. It's ruining business. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate being with you.
Jim, on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank you for such a thoughtful address this morning.